Time to put some stuff away, which I'm going to speed up for you guys real quick here. Then we're going to put the rest of the computer back together. I'm going to take the CPU heatsink and CPU fan here. You see that broken metal? That's actually how it was removed from the processor. The processor has some metal on it as well. And we're going to have to get that off and probably put some thermal grease on the processor and make a better connection. See, I'm scraping off the metal that is broken. So a lot of times on laptops, the manufacturer likes to use that thin sheet of aluminum or whatever it is to create a connection. But when it rips apart, the seal between the processor and the heatsink is not that great, so we're going to have to do it the good old-fashioned way with thermal grease. You want to get that processor removed of all the gook on there and make it nice and shiny. And then be careful that there's no residue of the paper. If you're using a paper towel like I am, make sure there's no residue of a paper towel. It might burn up. So once I'm sure I get the residue off, it's a little piece of Scotch-Brite I'm using. Just don't use that. You don't want to push too hard with that. You can on the heatsink, but not on the processor itself. In fact, it's not a real good thing to use, but it might give you a little bit clean surface to work with. This gets to be kind of a pain. It's real gummy. When you get under that sheet of aluminum, there's a gummy residue that you have to get off. So just do the best you can. And then once we get a nice clean spot on the heat sink there, we'll reattach it, put a little drop of thermal grease, and we'll be okay. In fact, I'm using a real fine grade sandpaper here. Just getting off that stingy residue, which I will speed up because it might take me a while to do this. It actually took me a lot longer than I expected, so we're going to go to the next step here, and then we'll get that CPU heatsink and fan back on. We're going to test the connections we made using our voltmeter. We're going to set it for continuity, touch it to certain points on the circuit that we just created there, and see if, just make sure that there's no short circuit. I'm just touching a ground point, and then those two wires that we put on the motherboard, they're both on the positive side. They're positive points on the motherboard. So if we touch a ground point to one of those points of that red wire we just installed, and you hear a beep when you're testing for continuity, then you know, because it should not be touching any ground points, those wires we installed. There should be no contact with ground points. Just take our paintbrush and clean up as much of the bottom case as you can since you got it open. We're going to take the motherboard now. We're going to place it back into its spot. And we're going to see if it fits. Now that we added those wires might be causing a problem where it won't fit now. So I'm just going to try to size it up and make sure that it fits. And I'm just looking to see if when I put the motherboard back, is it gonna create any short circuit with any of the points of the bottom case? Is our red wire going to be touching any points of that case that we don't want it to touch? Because remember, those wires weren't there before, so it's like an extra protrusion. You want to make sure that it fits okay and there's no connections made that you don't want to be made between the case and the wires that we installed. And I think we're going to be okay. Throw the motherboard in there. Again, if it doesn't sit flush, find out why. And in this case, it's not sitting flush because that wire was under there, which is the speaker wire. Now I'm going to speed up the video here. Again, this computer gets put together the same way it came apart. Use the proper screws and the proper holes there. Get it all back together. Clean it up, little bits and pieces where you can. The wireless card in there. We're going to put that screen back on. Screw the screen down, and then we're going to feed that wireless antenna through. And put it back in the little slot it goes in. Same thing with the LCD cable. Okay, that's in pretty solid. Attach the wireless antenna. Hard drive goes in there. And I'm going to slow the footage down as I install the heat sink on the CPU. Again, get the stickiness off of that CPU. I'm using Scotch-Brite, but just use it very, very gently if you're using Scotch-Brite. Clean it off with the paintbrush, make sure there's a good connection. I'm going to pull out the thermal grease here. I use Arctic Silver, but it's actually the ceramic version. So it's not quite silver, but the company's Arctic Silver. And I put a little dab on there. And I like to take a piece of Scotch tape, put it on my fingers long ways, and use it as a little steamroller to level out all the thermal grease, and it's the way you keep your fingers clean. I just don't trust when I just put a little glob of thermal grease on there, it's going to distribute itself evenly, so I like to distribute it a little bit. And now take your nice new clean heat sink, which we hope is clean enough. Sometimes the best way to get that stickiness off is with your fingers. And that's the best we're going to get. So remember to attach the CPU fan. It's vitally urgent. Your computer will overheat. You don't want to cause damage to that processor. And it's a little hairy in there. That's why it might have been a good idea to do this before we put everything back together. But I think we'll be all right. There it goes. And that slides right in there. The fan does. And the heatsink sits right on top of the processor. Make sure it's all lined up. And then I like to screw these back in a crisscross fashion like you're putting on a tire. Distribute the pressure evenly on the processor. And these plates, this is the last plate I got to put on. This covers the fan and the heatsink. They get dusty. They get dirty. Clean them up since you have them out. Like I said, always try to give your laptop back to the customer in a better condition, in a cleaner condition than when you got it. Cleaner is the key word. Now, even brush off the bottom of that keyboard. Get it all nice and clean. You don't want little particles and residue flitting around on the motherboard, so... Okay, going to reattach that cable. Make sure it's in far enough, the way it's supposed to be. Lock it down. Make sure it's all lined up straight. Then mount the keyboard back. Usually snaps in under the plate there and then push down at the top. And I know that this particular keyboard screws in two spots. One right next to the CPU fan and the other one where the wireless card goes. Two little silver screws. Very tricky. You would not think that they hold the keyboard in, but that's what I learned. Then we're going to mount this plate back on, and then we're almost done. Yes, Best Buy worked on this. You can tell by their lovely purple stickers. Chances are they didn't open it up. Otherwise, they may have charged this customer more than this computer's worth. Sorry, Best Buy, but your prices are real high. Make sure all those screws are tight, but don't over-tighten them. Never over-tighten any of these laptop screws. Just snugly fit them in there, and that should be fine. They usually have some kind of, adhesive or glue on the screw itself. That's what that blue and red color is on those screws. You'll see them are coated in blue and red. It's to kind of lock the screw in. And get all those screws in. I'm unscrewing it now for some reason. I forgot something. What did I forget? I think I just remembered, but if you guys were observant, you would know. And the missing thing is, yes, the RAM. And I shouldn't have put that one on top first. It's impossible to put that bottom one in second. So okay, we're going to mount the RAM back in. Put this cover back on. Then the only thing we should have left is the hinge cover plate, the plate covering the wireless adapter. Throw the battery back in, and I think we're in business. Get the wireless cover back on there. Dust it off first. Those covers get real dusty. You'd be surprised how much dust comes off of them. If the dust is too thick, I don't use the paintbrush because I don't want to get the paintbrush too messed up. I just use a wet dry vac with the brush attachment. Okay, let's put this cover back on, the hinge plate cover. Or the hinge cover plate. Sorry. Now in this laptop, I believe there's 2 screws holding that plate in from the back once we get it on there. They go right over the hinge covers. Just snap these in. Sometimes they take a little maneuvering, but they will eventually go in, and they need to lay flush. They need to lay exactly how it was before you took it off. And you'll know where it is because there won't be any lumps in it. Let's get these 2 screws on that hold those hinge covers on. It's another thing you want to be careful of. You don't want to go prying that hinge cover plate off knowing that there's screws holding it in from the back because you're going to break it. So always check for those screws holding it in from the back. Gateways are famous for having them. Maybe Acers. Old HPs have them. Not too many other models have them that I know of. Now, before we plug anything in, I always like, if we do a major power jack repair, I always like to test to see if there's any short circuits before I plug anything in. I don't want to fry anything. So I'm going to touch the center pin with the red connector, and I'm going to touch a ground point with the black lead here. That's actually the other way around. It does not matter if you're doing testing continuity. The black plate is actually going to touch the middle pin. And there was no short circuit, meaning there was no beep. If we heard a beep, we'd know we'd be in trouble. Now we're going to take the power adapter and we're going to plug it in and test this thing out. And we're getting nothing. Why are we getting nothing? Time to diagnose now. Let's test the power adapter. And we're getting 20 volts or 19 volts. You couldn't see it, but the power adapter appears to be working. So let's plug the battery in and see what's going on. I'm pretty confident we did the repair okay on the power jacks, so there's got to be something else going on here. Let's see if it charges the battery. We got the power adapter in there. We're going to jiggle the power adapter. See if that makes any difference. Still not power.